Welcome to Grain Rainbows, the podcast community for people coming out LGBT plus later in life. I'm your host, Dr. Ginger Campbell. For more episodes of Grain Rainbows, please visit my website at grainrainbows.com or subscribe in your favorite podcasting app. You can send me email at grainrainbows@gmail.com or submit voice feedback at speakpipe.com/Doc Artemis. Grain Rainbows also has a Facebook community, and I'll tell you more about that later. My guest today is Dr. Ikeranda Smith. Dr. Ikeranda, as she prefers to be called, teaches psychology at Atlantic Technical College, and she has her own personal coaching practice where she helps people who are struggling with the coming out journey. She also has a personal passion to help reduce homelessness in our cities. Have you ever considered hiring a personal coach? The key tool of coaching is asking empowering questions to help clients live more fulfilling lives. I'm currently training to become a certified professional coach, and I will begin to accept a limited number of clients in November of 2019. Until then, I will be offering a small number of free introductory sessions. If you think you might benefit from this approach, you can email me at grainrainbows@gmail.com. So, Ikeranda, it is so great to finally get you on Grain Rainbows. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
I guess you probably listened to an episode of the show and have a sense of the format. So I usually just ask people to start out by sharing their stories. Do you feel okay with that?
Absolutely. I came out many moons ago. I was in high school and I was dating a young lady. And it's interesting, I actually shared this coming out story on social media. My mom was in the house and me and my partner at the time was having an argument. And my mom came out and she kind of looked and she was like, what is going on? You know, assuming like, why are you and this young lady having such a passionate conversation? You know how you are when you're young, just feeling like you know everything.
Yep.
And she came out and she wanted to interject. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, stay out of this. I was like, get out of here. I said, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm gay. And I turned around and kept, having the pandering with my partner at the time. And she kind of looked at me, you know how someone looks when they're like, they were unsure of what they heard. And she kind of pivoted and walked back in the room. And after it was over and my partner left and everything subsided, she looked at me and she said, you can't be gay in my home. And so I was in high school. And so like many young people who are very sure of themselves, I left and right after high school and I never went back. But the good news is today my mom is a P-flag parent and very affirming and,
So how many years did it take for your mother to really come to a peace with the whole thing?
It took my mom all of her life. My mom is 73 this year. And I would probably say this year is probably the first year that she actually became really resolved. She's had some moments where she was a little bit better because sometimes we can be tolerated, but not accepted. Meaning, oh, I know you're gay and I get it, but I just don't want to see it. So we had a lot of years of that too. But this was the first year where she really embraced me and my wife, loves our union. And she really came to a place of peace.
That's fantastic. I love to hear these stories because I think most people's stories illustrate the value of patience. Things don't happen overnight.
No.
Are you familiar with Rick Clemens' work?
I've heard of him.
Okay, so I heard this from him, and I'm sure he's not the only one that says it, but when you go to your family and you come out now, in your case it kind of just happened, but say when you're an adult and you're like grappling, and then you finally tell your family, you've had all that grappling, but you sort of spring it on them. And you act as if they should be, some of us act as if they should be as ready as we are, right?
Yes.
And that's usually not a realistic expectation.
No, by a long shot.
The other thing I've learned from listening to people is that people surprise you. So many times the person they thought would be supportive freaks out, and the person they thought would freak out is supportive.
Yeah, indeed.
So what kind of work are you doing now?
So I am a professor, and I also I'm a coach, a life coach, and I do a lot of workshops, and I have clients that I help. And so my specialty is particularly LGBTQIA community, of course, but my clients range from cisgender to queer, of course. But I am really doing the work that I feel that I was put here to do. I always say that your pain becomes your passion. And for so long, I was very uncomfortable in my skin because I used to be married to a man for 7 years. So even after I came out to my mom many years ago, I went back in the closet.
That's not unusual either.
And I did that a lot of trying to just get people to accept me and get my family to be comfortable. But you find out that other people being comfortable makes you even more uncomfortable. Once I divorced my ex-husband and I really came to a place of peace, I knew that I had to do the work that spoke to who I was as a Black queer woman. And that's what I did. And I'm so at peace and I'm so happy.
Is that when you decided to train to become a personal coach, or were you already in the field?
I was already in the field. I've always been helping people. When I did my residency, when I was getting my PhD, I worked with a lot of clients who had dealt with trauma. And I always say that you either are seeing who you used to be, who you are, or who you want to be. Simple as that. So when I was helping a lot of these people, I worked at a homeless shelter, and I did a lot of working at my doctor's office. I always had the privilege of meeting people who were mirroring my life. And I realized that throughout my healing and the work that I was doing, I was really healing myself as I was helping other people heal. So it was so curative, and it was life-changing.
Is your PhD in psychology?
It's in psychology, and I have a specialization in teaching.
Mm-hmm. And what is your professorship in?
It's in psychology. So I teach introduction to psychology and basic psychology, which is absolutely amazing because, as you know, psychology is in every field. I don't teach psychology in the classroom like most professors. I literally bring the world into the classroom. So I take all the subject areas and I make it really applicable to life. And it really elevates, it amplifies my classroom so that people can walk away and feel like they didn't not only receive 5 credits, but they received a life-changing experience.
So that's equally satisfying to your coaching. You get 2 complementary things, right?
Absolutely.
How do you, like, say a person, especially, I'm aiming at older adults, which can be anything. I've learned that later in life depends on how old you are, what you think that means. How does somebody decide if they need a coach or a therapist? I mean, with your dual training, you must run into that, trying to figure out exactly what your role should be sometimes.
So a lot of times what I tell people by the time they get to me, they have a clear understanding of who they are and what their problems are. And they really just need someone to kind of steer them in a direction. They kind of need like a cheerleader per se. They need someone to really hold them accountable and really say, okay, this is what I'm going to give you to do for this week. And when we meet back up, I want you to tell me what you've done and what you've learned from it. Whereas people who need a therapist, they clearly have no clue of what is wrong and what's going on. They just know that they've hit an impasse in life and they don't feel well.
Do you commonly take care of people who are sort of in the transition where they're still getting therapy, but they also use a coach?
Absolutely. I have clients who go to a therapist and they come to me, and it works really well too because they can see the work that their therapist is giving them plus the work that I'm giving, and it's mirroring one another. So they feel like they're coming along well.
Okay. So given what you know a little bit about my audience, do you have any particular advice or experience that you want to share?
Absolutely. What's so awesome with your audience is that what people don't realize, I think, with the older generation, there's this intergenerational conversation that we need to have more often. And I think that we're more alike than we are not alike. And I think with the older generation, a lot of people are sometimes coming out later in life. But what I find out as being a 40-year-old, soon to be 41 this year, that I too can relate more to the older generation because I am always coming out. You're never fully out. And even now, as secure as I am, there are some times where I'm always questioning, am I really still coming out? It seems like it would be like a definitive, I'm done. And I also feel like that as you get older, there are these conversations that we need to have with the younger generation, because I think that I admire their freedom that we didn't get a chance to have.
And they don't necessarily appreciate the struggles of even like a person coming out now, like of my generation, has got baggage based on what things were like when we were young.
Absolutely.
Just take, for example, the word queer. I'm getting used to it. But when I started this show, I was really uncomfortable with it because when I was a teenager, that was a slur.
I agree with you. When I was younger, the F word was just like when you say queer, it was a slur. But today, they use all the things that we thought were derogatory as a way to reclaim their freedom.
Right. It seems that, and when I first started, I thought that it was purely a political thing. But now I'm understanding that a lot of people are using it because it seems to be the only phrase that isn't sort of binary.
Yes.
Yeah. For example, one of my guests' partner is becoming a man and they're staying together and they're like, well, what do we call our relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm coming to appreciate the use of the term. I'm not quite ready to go out in a T-shirt yet, though.
What I am trying to do is really amplify the voices of the people in my community, because in the Black community, there's a lot of shame and stigma attached to being gay. And it's attached to religion, unfortunately so. And I think that's another thing that kind of keeps us in bondage, so to speak, is wanting to be in the good graces of this God that we feel like that our parents and forefathers and caregivers have made us feel like that we need approval. When really, as we get older, we come into a different level of spirituality where we feel like we are enough, if you're lucky.
Right. So one of the problems that a lot of my listeners are really struggling with is how to tell their children. Do you have any experience or ideas about that?
Absolutely. I think what is the best thing to do is just really be honest. I think we don't give our children enough credit. We assume that we won't be accepted. But I think the lie is what really keeps us from being accepted, because people look at you and they say, you know, I really never knew who you were. Whereas just coming out and just telling your truth and explaining too, because of course, when you tell your truth, of course, there's like, well, why didn't you say anything? And I think really people understanding the history of why people don't share is more important, or just as important as telling your family that you're gay.
That's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm actually myself training to be a coach. Mm-hmm. And so learning that whole open-ended question thing.
Yeah.
And on my other podcasts, I always have a list of questions. Mm-hmm. And this is the only show I do where I just kind of wing it. So every so often I hit a, what do I say next? moment.
No, it's beautiful.
So what was the most surprising thing you've learned on your journey?
The most surprising thing is the very thing that you mentioned earlier, that the people that you think would not be accepting are, and vice versa. We give one person too much credit and another person not enough.
Is there anything else that you really want to share?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I want to share is that I really am hoping that we can have more intergenerational dialogues. I think that, you know, it's kind of like what you mentioned is like when you were coming up, and even when I was coming up, certain things were so taboo. And now the younger generation, they're kind of like, they're free, so to speak. And I think that what we need to do is we need to kind of find a way to have more conversations about our struggles, because they're all the same. How we view them and how we face them are very differently, but they're all the same. And I think that we should know that we have a lot more in common than we think we do. Because I know for me, I really need allies. Because to me, being married to my wife, I want to be able to connect with older, seasoned people who have been in relationships for a long time. It's no different as if you were in a heteronormative relationship. You need your community.
Yeah. I'm blessed to have two women in my life who've been together for about 40 years.
Really?
They haven't been married all that time because, that's a relatively new thing.
Absolutely.
But, of course, they're both in their 70s, but that's how long they've been together. It's pretty amazing. And they're definitely a source of inspiration.
Are they still in love?
I'm sure they are. They act just like old married people.
Really?
Yeah, one of the things that concerns me about, and I agree with you about this need for dialogue, is the need to know about our history. I mean, like right with Pride Month just ending and all this emphasis on Stonewall, the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and people not realizing how bad things were, especially in the 50s. That's why somebody my age, I look at Trump and I'm scared to death.
Me too. And you're a white woman, so.
Right, exactly. I realize that I'm relatively safe, but it doesn't take much to lose progress.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that happened in the 50s was that people couldn't speak up.
No.
They were silenced. So that's why it's important that we not be invisible now.
Absolutely. And people are still getting killed just like they were years ago. I mean, just the other day, I was reading an article about a young man, queer young man. He was beat up when he was riding the train just the other day.
Yeah. And of course, the problem is the attitudes are inflaming all kinds of bigotry, not just bigotry against. And you, of course, are more probably in tune with that problem than I am as a Black woman.
Absolutely. But I think the conversations need to be had. I think that we've made progress and we've moved the needle, but I think that there's more progress that needs to be made. It takes more people coming out. And another thing that I encourage people to do too is finding careers where you can bring your whole self. A lot of times you enter into professions and you're two different people. You're one way at work and then you're one way at home. And that's difficult. You're sitting around the water cooler having conversations with your colleagues over the weekend, like, okay, well, what did you do for the 4th? Oh, me and my wife and me and my husband and blah, blah, blah. And then you're the queer person sitting there and you're like, well, what did you do? I just hung out with friends and family. But on the inside, you're thinking, I did the same thing you did. I hung out with my wife or my partner. But we shrink because in this environment that we've signed on to, we can't be our whole selves. And so that's something that I encourage people to is find professions and craft careers where you can bring your whole self.
Right. There's a guy named Rhodes Perry who does a show called The Out Entrepreneur. He's a trans man, and he wrote a book called Belonging at Work.
Oh, wow.
And in his book, he talks about how the data shows 70% of people cover at work. So that's not just the people you think it would be.
Absolutely.
And it's a huge drain on productivity if a person is, exactly just like you said.
Yes. And then you couple that with mental health, right?
Right.
And that's another thing that we don't talk about because like you just said, if I can't do my job properly, then of course, now I'm taking mental health days because I can't do my work. I don't feel well. I'm depressed. I can't show up like my whole self. And that's another thing that is very rampant in our community is mental health challenges.
Right. But one bright note is that it seems like the more progressive companies are appreciating the need for this. And so
absolutely.
Companies like Apple who are taking the lead and doing the right thing.
And there are it's a lot of small corporations that are taking a stand too. And that's important too.
Yeah. And it's harder when you're small.
It is.
Yeah. I appreciate you talking with me. Has anything else popped into your head?
I'm so thankful that we will get a chance to connect and really discuss being gay in America.
I'll definitely be able to, share your link on the website and vice versa. I think our work hopefully is complementary, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your work.
I think you're doing great work.
You too.
Thank you.
And I hope where do you live?
I live in Atlanta.
Okay, well, maybe we'll meet sometime. I tried to hook up with Cassandra when I was over there last week, but she was traveling. I think she travels a lot.
Do you come to Atlanta?
Once in a while. I just live in Birmingham, so it's not that far.
Oh, you're not far. How is it being gay in Birmingham?
It's easier than being an atheist.
Really?
Mm. But I go to the Unitarian Church where I can be both.
Absolutely. Okay. Makes sense. How long have you lived there?
Oh, gosh, over 40 years.
Okay, all your life, basically.
Well,
a good portion.
No, not all my life. But I came here with my husband when we were newlyweds.
So you were married too?
I was married for 38 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Then I came out after my husband died.
Did you know you were?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I self-identified as bi. I mean, that's what most of us do when we're in that situation. So I didn't figure it out till I was already married.
Wow. Did your husband know?
Well, I told him, but he didn't really believe me. You know how men's egos are.
He said, no, I'm too handsome for you to be that.
Yeah, we used to have this fight about my hair, okay? And I could only cut it to a certain shortness because he was afraid if it was beyond a certain shortness, it would make me look butch. Mm-hmm. And so I have to admit one of the first things I did after he died was cut my hair really short. I mean, it was already short, but I cut it as short as I wanted it.
So you rebelled. You said,
well, no, I just always wanted to have short hair. So,
yeah.
He really wasn't that bossy, but that was just one thing that he had a thing about. I think it was because I played competitive softball for several years, and he was super supportive. But during that time, I would usually be the only married person on the team.
Okay.
Yeah. I got reverse discrimination.
Wow. I could tell by your build that you was pretty athletic.
Yeah. So, yeah, I got reverse discrimination. I used to say they treated me like I was the one that was queer. But in retrospect, I understood it was about fear.
Of course.
Because this was back when nobody was out.
Mm.
Yeah. Late 70s, early 80s, very few people were out.
Very few, yeah.
And people had jobs, like school teachers. They'd have gotten fired.
Yeah.
So I probably would have been better off if I just played dumb. But I really wanted to be a part of the community. That was the irony. That was what would screw me up, is I would want to be friends with all the lesbians on my team. And so instead of just pretending like I didn't know they were all gay, I would say something stupid like, it's okay. Looking at it in retrospect, I know it was stupid. And then, of course, they would get scared, and then they would sort of freeze me out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was
Are you in partnership?
I haven't met anybody yet. I'm still trying out that like a half a date.
Yeah, I hear it's pretty challenging out here.
Well, and I am 63 years old, so even if I was looking for a man, it would be a challenge.
Yeah, but it's interesting enough. I see a lot of people your age really doing well in relationships. So if that's any consolation, you might have to venture outside of Birmingham.
Probably so. I'm already accepting that probability, yeah.
Because there's someone out there for you.
Well, I believe that too. So, yeah, you don't have to remind me, but thanks. Okay, well, you want to close, or do you have anything else you want to tell my listeners? I apologize for no canned questions.
No. So thank you so much for having me. This has been absolutely amazing. And I appreciate you for sharing my story and allowing me to tell a little bit of what I do and how I'm trying to shed a little bit more light in the world.
I want to thank Dr. Ikeranda Smith for sharing her time with me. I'll have a link to both her website and her Amazon author page in the show notes at grainrainbows.com. Dr. Ikeranda is actually the third coach who has appeared on Grain Rainbows so far. The other two were Midge Noble and Rick Clemens. One of the goals of Graying Rainbows is to provide resources to listeners who are struggling with coming out later in life. Hearing other people's stories is powerful, but it's not enough. Eventually, I hope to have more resources on the website, but for now, the show notes are your best bet. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit more about coaching and how it compares to other approaches like counseling, therapy, and consulting. Because I'm about 2/3 of the way to becoming a certified coach, these differences are very fresh on my mind. Dr. Ikeranda indicated that counseling and therapy help people who are struggling to accept their LGBT plus identities or who face mental health challenges like depression. Therapeutic approaches often focus on understanding how our past experiences have influenced who we are today. In contrast, coaching is more future-oriented. Coaching is for people who want to move forward. Perhaps you want to explore your dreams and decide what you really want to do with the rest of your life. Or you might know what you want, but you feel stuck and need help moving forward. Either way, coaching works on the premise that most of the answers lie within the client. Our job as coaches is to ask empowering questions, provide encouragement, and also accountability. I'll be talking more about these ideas in coming months, but for today, I also want to explain how coaching is different from consulting. When you hire a consultant, you're paying them to tell you what should be done. A really good coach is going to help you find your own solutions. Finding the right coach is a very personal decision. That's why I'm glad to feature other coaches on Graying Rainbows. Also, because of professional time constraints, I'm not going to be able to start accepting regular clients until November 2019. However, I am scheduling complimentary introductory coaching sessions. So if this interests you, just email me at grayingrainbows@gmail.com. Please let me know what you think about the show. You can send me email or voicemail. You can also leave comments on the website or on the Graying Rainbows Facebook fan page. If you'd like to join our private Facebook group, the easiest thing to do is to go to the fan page and click the link that you'll see on the right-hand side of the logo. Recently, quite a few people have submitted requests to join the group without answering the questions. The questions are there to protect the privacy of everyone in the group. If you don't want to take the time to answer, please at least indicate that you listen to the podcast and tell me your favorite episode. Several members of the group have been asking for a lower age limit. I didn't originally specify one because I think the definition of later in life is very subjective. However, based on the group's concerns, the public age limit is a minimum of the age of 30. If you happen to fall below this threshold, please send me a private message or email so we can determine if the group is actually a good fit for you. Midge Noble is helping me keep track of the requests to join the group, but we can't approve people who don't provide at least a brief description of why they want to join, and this should include your age. Before I close, I want to thank you for listening and for sharing Graying Rainbows with others. I'm still sending out Amazon gift cards to everyone who sends me a screenshot of their iTunes review, but word of mouth is probably more effective. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at social media, so I really need your help to get the word out. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Graying Rainbows. In the meantime, I hope you will check out my other podcasts, Books and Ideas, and Brain Science. Thanks again for listening. Graying Rainbows is copyright Virginia Campbell, MD. You can copy this show to share it with others, but for any other uses or derivatives, please contact me at grayingrainbows@gmail.com.